It turns into these, what I call for him, a tantrum. The kids can see it and hear it and stuff, and it's
So is he being silly or is he being an immature brat?
no, he's making it. Yeah, he's being a, what you would say, a brat. He is like, why do I have to do this all, like, every weekend? And their kids are pretty small; they're toddlers, and he'll go on to say, this is for you, what you like to do, and because they're not going to remember. So what's the point? This is a waste of time, and we shouldn't be spending the money anyway. And he just keeps going on. And
woman calls into a call-in talk show, and she refers to her husband as a spoiled child. Now, this is sort of common thing now for 2025, women referring to their husbands as children or their significant others as immature in some way and in some degrading sort of form. But let's unpack, though, when a woman says this, what does she actually mean? So we'll take this little excerpt from the Dr. John Deloney show. So you guys have my reference points and a lot of interesting case studies here on this show. Let's check this out.
It turns into these, what I call for him, a tantrum. The kids can see it and hear it and stuff, and it's just so hard. I don't know how to navigate through it. Like when we're just loading up the car.
Give me an example.
And it's well, he'll say, "Well, great, everyone's out today," and because we do things on the weekends. And I'm not the only one that had this idea. And then, I should be working instead of out, doing this. And
so is he being silly or is he being an immature brat?
No, he's making it. Yeah, he's being a, what you would say, a brat. He is like, why do I have to do this all, like, every weekend? And their kids are pretty small; they're toddlers, and he'll go on to say, this is for you, what you like to do, and because they're not going to remember. So what's the point? This is a waste of time, and we shouldn't be spending the money anyway. And he just keeps going on. And
all right, there's a lot of good lessons from this quick little video. Here's one of them, is that some of you guys who are in your relationships and in your marriages have really bad attitudes. You expect a woman to care about your crappy attitude. Some of you guys expect your woman to give you all kinds of consolations and emotional support for your complaining and your bad attitude because of all the work you think you do, or all the sacrifices you think you're making, or the hardships you are going through. And you may be making sacrifices and going through hardships, but that doesn't take away from the fact that poor leadership involves a bad attitude. And the problem with relationships today is we are not approaching relationships in 2025 from a leadership perspective. We're not seeing a relationship for what it is, which is a power dynamic. We're instead looking at relationships as if it is a companionship with two people having equal power in that relationship and power over each other, coming to a negotiation table for needs. And this completely violates how our brain has evolved as a species for us to come together, mate together, and feel good about being with each other. You can't force a modern view of relationships and of equality into your mid and lower brain that's evolved over time to making us the tribal species that we are as human beings. As the tribal species that we are, our drive is to fulfill certain roles in a sexual relationship or sexual dynamic. And generally, minus a very, very small percentage of outliers, and I'm talking 1% of outliers, 1 to 2 percentage points of outliers, generally speaking, the guy should be leading the relationship. What does it mean when a woman calls the guy immature, spoiled child or this, right? This and that. Something to indicate that he's not behaving like an adult. All right. Now we're going to remove the humor side of that, or the, the shit test kind of stuff, and we'll look at what it means when she genuinely feels the guy's acting like a child. Well, what she means is that he is not leading. What she means is he is not showing up and being the man that she hoped and wanted him to be when she got in that relationship. When she gave her commitment away, there was a level of trust that she was trying to have for her man that she was giving her commitment to, that he would make good decisions and behave like a good leader in that relationship. She essentially, it was saying in that commitment, in the nature of that commitment, that I am willing to give up my power in this power dynamic and give up some control for the benefit of the relationship so that my man can lead this thing. And the guy is failing at that leadership. So when a girl is saying, "Oh, he's just so immature," or he's like, he's this bad attitude, all the stuff, she is illustrating, whether she realizes it or not, that he is being a poor leader and that he cannot be trusted as a leader, and she cannot trust his leadership in this relationship. When a woman doesn't trust your leadership in a relationship, she sees you as a child that she needs to take care of. And many of you men, particularly you married men, are acting like children. You really are. Your wife sees you as another child that she needs to take care of. You have no frame in your life. Even if you are the provider and you make the money, you feel like you are somehow imprisoned or enslaved by your family and the financial hardships that you have in supporting them. And that is not coming from a place of control and leadership and problem solving. It's coming from a place of I'm the victim and I want everyone else to take responsibility for my emotions. That's what's happening. And some of you guys just don't, whatever your relationships were with your mom or whatever, you just haven't grown out of that. And you don't understand that the dynamic in this relationship with a woman who is trusting you, all right, giving you her commitment, the dynamic there is where you lead and you make decisions as a man so that she feels that sense of security as well as power and dominance from you. And that's what creates attraction. Many of you guys have sexless relationships, sexless marriages, relationships where the woman is showing up like a bitchy version of herself. And some of you guys get into, content on the internet and want to berate the woman for her behavior. And I'm not saying women in 2025 are acting right, because they're not a lot of times, but a lot of times that's not the reason either. A lot of times this isn't the case of the feminist conditioned boss babe acting like unattractive and whatever. The Western woman acting like, acting in an unattractive way. A lot of times this is the case of a woman being with you and you are a terrible leader. And you can hear as she talks and as they go back and forth, the guy's this financial provider. However, he's behaving like, oh, going out and hanging out with you and the kids. He doesn't want to do it. Well, why does he want to do it? Because he's taking away from his me time. It's taking away from his work time so he can provide for the family more. Well, then listen, if you're married, you have a family, you need me time. Who's in charge of that relationship? Is she in charge? Are the kids in charge? Or are you in charge? If you need time for yourself, take time for yourself. If you have financial struggles, then address your financial problems. Don't bring all those problems and your emotions about those problems to your time with your kids, your time with your family, your time with your wife. Either don't spend the time, okay, and work on stuff you need to work on, or spend the time and be present. And if obviously, I'm not suggesting you should just not spend time with your family. If you have a family and that's what you wanted, then maybe you should figure out a way to enjoy that time with them despite your stress and your pressure. Listen, women can do what they can to be feminine and to be a good companion and to provide somewhat of a soft place for you to land, but they're not there to be your mom. They're not there to mother you through your problems. And if you're showing up with a bad attitude and expecting her to really have this compassion, empathy for you, then you don't understand women. She can't have compassion for you, and she can't have empathy for you until you show up the right way. When you show up like that dominant male leader that's doing his best and not bringing your emotional baggage to her for her to fix, when you do that right, then she'll have compassion for you. Okay. But if she has to step into your shoes and your role, and she has to be the male leader of the relationship, now the power dynamic's off, the attraction goes away, and the feelings aren't there. And she's not going to respect you. She's not going to mother you. In fact, she's going to want to do the opposite of that. All right, now pay attention to this next part because I don't always agree with this, the show host here on his advice, but this is actually pretty good. And so I want to unpack this with you guys. I want to give credit where it's due. I think this is something to pay attention to.
Have you ever heard me talk about pictures and words before?
No.
Okay. So I think one of the easiest ways to distill down 99% of marriage conflict is this idea that we think in pictures, but we speak in words.
Okay.
And so, for instance, your husband says, I'll do something with the family this weekend. And you say, let's do something with the family this weekend.
Okay.
You have a very clear picture in your mind about what you think that's going to look like. Y'all are going to be singing in the car. The kids are going to be well behaved. Y'all are going to go get ice cream or breakfast or whatever you're doing. Like, y'all are going to go do some things together, go to a park and play.
Mm-hmm.
He has a picture of something totally different. And so the first time somebody cuts him off in traffic, or the first time he goes to the first place y'all wanted to go and it's full, and you see what I'm saying? Like, you miss each other in the night.
Okay.
And so, or he'll say something like, hey, finances are kind of tight. Well, you'll think, okay, I'll just order water instead of Diet Coke. And he's thinking, we're $10,000 short right now. And he's trying to shoulder it all without
Right.
the skills to communicate or the desire to communicate with you, the actual situation.
I like his illustration here of the communication mismatch. Now, here's the problem though. He does dispense some advice. It's not necessarily terrible advice. However, 99%, chance out of 100, this will not work. Okay? So, what's going to work between the couple that called in? It's just not going to unless some major things happen, okay? Now, the reason is it's not going to work isn't really necessarily the fault of the guy who's running the the show, the call-in show. It's just that we have a couple of things going on here that make it not work. And you need to know this so that you can make things work in your relationship as the man who's leading the relationship. So the first part of the problem, and this is a struggle I run into with my female clients. I mostly coach men, but I do get some female clients, is that I can't go through the female to train the man on the skills that he needs to communicate in the relationship and to lead his relationship. You see, because we've evolved in the way that our brains fit together in relationships, she wants the man to take charge and lead it in the right direction. The man doesn't have the skill sets to do so. And so giving her advice on where to take this it ends up being misplaced. I mean, with good intentions, it just ends up being misplaced because she cannot put herself in the driver's seat to take this relationship where it needs to go. She will never feel right about taking that position. She won't communicate properly, and it's going to bring out bad feelings in the relationship. And the guy is going to be reactive and he's not going to communicate properly either. They're going to end up right back where they were at, if not worse, with her trying to be the person to take the torch. The advice, really, part of the advice needed to be that this guy doesn't have the skill sets. He doesn't have the training and how to lead relationships and how to handle and communicate his concerns or needs, and that he needs to go get that training. So that needed to be a part of the advice. It wasn't. All right. Because without him being trained on what to do, all the advice in the world is useless now. Okay. So that being said, most of you guys that are listening to me are men. So let me give you some advice on how to train you, how to handle these things. Okay. How to lead properly. So the first thing to train you and teach you how to lead, what he's talking about is having different pictures in their heads, right? And this is true. I like the analogy because the woman tends to have a picture in her head where she is the star of her own play or story, and she's the main character, and everything sort of plays itself out in a certain way. And she has a certain conditions and stuff that she wants to meet. Now, he doesn't explain it this way, by the way. This is my framing, understanding sexual dynamics maybe a little bit differently, and I would say better than most. Okay. So women have a natural solipsism, and that's not a bad thing. Okay. It just is what it is. And she has a sort of vision for how, I'm going to go on date night. She has kind of an idea of what that looks like, but her idea isn't based on necessarily logical steps. If you force her to answer the question of what a good date would be like, she now has to climb into a different part of her brain in order to try to illustrate some conditions that need to be met. But the reality is women don't really think that way when it comes to having experience with their significant other. What they really want is to have certain emotions and feelings that unfold and play themselves out throughout the experience. She just wants to have the right feelings and to feel good about and to feel a certain way that she expects to feel when having that experience on that date or out with the family or doing whatever you're doing on a Saturday. And it's up to you to create those feelings through the experience. You, as a man, you have vasopressin in your brain as a connective thing to your significant other. So you're thinking about how can I facilitate or take care of her needs and also feel good myself and have a good experience myself. And what do those logistics look like? Men tend to be more idealistic as far as how that plays itself out. All right. Or women might have certain conditions or ideas, but most of the time is she just wants to have the experience. And any of the ideas that she has are based on her emotions. And she's like a star of her own play, but she's also the audience member watching things unfold and having the experience. So she's not a narcissistic woman who expects everything to be the way that she wants or else. Some women are like that, but those are red flags, right? A normal woman, she's the star of the show. She's experiencing things through her lens, but she expects, she's also the audience member. She's watching the story unfold right before her into a narrative. And that narrative and all the emotions and feelings that happened in that narrative are either fitting what she wants or they're, and giving her a net positive, or they're not. And if they're not, then she's not having a good experience. You as the man, okay, having evolved to be the provider of resources and the protector, you want to facilitate her ability to let her experience. That's why guys tend to plan the date, right? That's why guys are the ones who court historically and should still be happening today. It's just how we're wired to fit together. Remember, there's a lot of things that are part of our nature. You can't go against that, or you're going to have a hard time and a bad time in the dating market. So you guys, they're there to facilitate this experience. Now, the guy in the story here, the husband from in the call-in that they're talking about, he's not thinking about facilitating an experience for her and for himself. I mean, when you part of the experience for you to having an amazing Saturday, if you're out with your girl or your wife and your family, is to create a good experience for them. Part of what makes you have a good experience is seeing them being happy with you and having that experience, right? For that's the way it is for any man without a mental problem. That's basically how it is, right? And so your job is to facilitate that. But this guy feels like there's financial pressure and problems, and like he doesn't have time for himself, and he's focused on that versus focusing on facilitating a good experience. And this is where mindset work comes to play and inner game comes to play. There's an inner game skill set to being able to set aside your stressors and your other things to focus on the things that are important. I bet you if I had this guy in an interview, he wouldn't sit there and say his wife is unimportant, his family sucks. This is probably the guy who would come crying to me after scheduling a consult when his wife is divorcing him because he didn't lead enough in his relationship. This is probably the guy, because I've had this guy in hundreds of consults who neglected the relationship and now is in a problem because she doesn't have the emotions for him anymore. She doesn't want to be there anymore. So I can almost guarantee you, again, unless the guy has a mental disorder, that he values his family, but he's stressed in the stuff that's going on outside of his experiences with his family is causing him to override his masculine leadership and ability to plan and facilitate the experience. Instead, he's focused on all the other stuff and complaining, being actually an immature guy. So part of why you need to, and this is why you should join my community, and the link is in the description and it's free, is to start getting your inner game in order and start learning skill sets like compartmentalizing. So you don't become this guy. You're not the guy who can't be present in a circumstance with your girl or with your family because you're too stressed out about other things. There's a skill set in handling that. Okay. He needs to learn that skill set so he can be a more dominant masculine presence. Next thing is learning communication skills. So what we're talking about with these different pictures is really empathy. Now, don't expect your girl to have the empathy for you because she's not trained to have that. She's not wired to have that. Her empathy and her sympathy really goes towards like anything she has to caretake for, like her children. So this is a vasopressin thing. Once again, women have a vasopressin, which is a neurochemical that's part of the connection and the bond with children. Oxytocin is also part of that bond, as well as other neurochemicals. Women don't have vasopressin bonding them to the guy that she sees as her sexual partner that she wants to be with. And in fact, if they do get vasopressin for that guy, they are no longer sexually attracted. So vasopressin is kind of a caretaking neurochemical. Your woman is not there to caretake for you, nor do you want her to. When I say caretake, I mean in the sense of mothering. She can take care of you like a good sexual partner and a good woman who's a complement to your life. But that's a bit different. That's more coming from a sense of submissiveness, and we could say obedience and subservience, words that are really going to trigger a lot of feminist leaning people. But those things coming from that place and that level of service for a dominant man who protects her and provides and makes her feel secure in the world. There's difference between serving that man and mothering somebody. Okay. And so with that, she's not designed to have empathy for you. You have to train, you have to teach her and sort of communicate with her so she can see what you need her to see. Okay. She's not going to see it naturally without some training and skill set on her part. And you're not going to really train that into her. It's just not a natural part of women. She'll have compassion for you once again when she's getting her needs taken care of and you're showing up like that guy. And then when you have struggles in showing up like that, she'll might, as a compliment to you, show you compassion. But if you're showing up wanting her to mother you, she's not going to have that. So you need to be able to have what I call tactical empathy and train it into this other person, and that's into your significant other. And that's where you have what I call Luca conversations. Luca stands for listen, understand, clarity, and action. And so this is a format of communicating from a leadership power dynamic framework versus coming to the negotiation table, which is a terrible way to communicate and operate in any relationship, because and that kills desire, kills motivation. And a lot of psychologists out there, a lot of YouTube channels with a lot more subscribers than me are telling you to negotiate with your significant other. I challenge you to not do that and just to instead have Luca conversations. This is where you ask questions, simple ones like, what kinds of things would you like to do this weekend? And then get her to paint a picture for you so you can facilitate that for her. You ask questions, you seek understanding, and that's not hard. You just shut your mouth and you ask good questions. When she's distressed or troubled because things aren't going her way, hey, tell me what's wrong. Obviously, things are not playing out the way that you'd like. And I think I know what some of that is, but I might be missing something. I might be missing something. So tell me what's happening. You're upset. What's going on with you? And then opening her up and just shutting your mouth and seeking understanding. And then if she's, needing to be challenged, or if you need to make sure that she understands that she is heard and understood, you offer clarity statement or you ask more questions. And then from there, it's an action plan. All right, babe, here's what we're going to do now. We'll do this next time, or here's what we're going to do instead. And you come up with an action plan that solves any of those distressing emotions, that tells her, hey, I understand the experience, the emotions you're trying to have. I understand what your idea and what your standard is and what you're trying to feel like. And now here's our action plan so we can make that happen. That's how you lead. That's how you communicate. Now, there's also telling illustrative narratives, techniques like elephant in the room, and all kinds of frame building and communication techniques in relationships that will help a man lead his relationship properly. You need those skill sets, which is why you're going to get in my community. And possibly if you're having struggles here, you need to book a consult through my community, send me a DM, and we'll talk about getting you into a mastermind group or something if I have a slot open. Okay, so that's where you need to take this, because these are skill sets. And the problem with the advice in this video is it didn't account for the skill sets that the man in the equation needs to learn. That should have been a part of that advice, but here we are. That's that situation, but don't make this your situation. If you're the man in the equation, you have to learn the relationship skill sets to lead properly and to communicate properly. And then you need the inner game skills so you can handle your problems and the emotions and the stressors of life without looking to your wife or your girl or your date to solve these problems for you and to dump those things on her. Don't let the world tell you any different, guys. You got to lead your relationships if you expect them to go where you want. Take care.